Okay, let's dive into this. We're always hearing about Australia's national debt, right? This massive, terrifying number that's apparently going to crush our kids and grandkids. But what if that entire story is, well, just a story? What if the thing we call debt isn't really debt at all?
You see, the whole concept of a national debt for a country like Australia, it's all built on a particular narrative. A narrative that, as we're about to see, just doesn't line up with how our money system actually works in the real world.
You've heard this a million times, I'm sure. Politicians, commentators, they love this analogy. They say the government has a giant credit card, and every single dollar it spends is another dollar our kids will have to find and repay. It's a really powerful image, and honestly, it's designed to be scary.
But here's the kicker. That whole story, it's just flat out wrong. Comparing the Australian government's finances to a household budget is like comparing an apple to a spaceship. I mean, sure, they're both things, but they operate on completely different laws of physics.
Okay, so this is the absolute key to understanding everything. Australia is a monetary sovereign. It issues its own currency, the Australian dollar. Now, unlike you or me, we have to go out and earn or borrow dollars. But the government, it's the source of those dollars. It can never, ever run out of them. It's like a referee running out of points to award in a footy match. It's just not possible.
So how does government spending actually work? Well, it's almost ridiculously simple. When the government decides to pay for something, say a hospital or a pension, it just tells the Reserve Bank to credit the recipient's bank account. And that's it. New money is created just like that, with a few keystrokes. You'll notice there's no step in there about borrowing the money first.
So a good way to think about it is this. Government spending is like turning on a tap, pouring new dollars into the economy. And taxes, they're like the drain, taking those dollars back out. But look closely at the plumbing in this picture. What's missing from the core operation? Government bonds. They simply aren't needed to make the system work. Which of course leads to a massive multi-billion-dollar question. If the government doesn't actually need to sell bonds to get money to spend, then what on earth are they for? Why does the government go through the whole process of issuing them? And here we get to the absolute heart of the confusion. The common story we're told is that bonds are borrowing, but the operational reality is that they're just an optional swap. The government offers to take cash, which, pays zero interest, and exchange it for a bond which pays interest. It's basically like you moving money from your everyday transaction account to a term deposit. You haven't funded the bank, you've just changed the form of your savings.
This is why some economists have come up with a much better name for it: pseudo debt. Because, yeah, it's recorded as debt, and everyone talks about it like it's debt, but it doesn't function like debt. It's really just a chunk of the Australian money supply that's been neatly repackaged into a savings account that pays interest.
All right, so if the government is choosing to pay interest on this pseudo debt, you've got to ask, where's all that interest money going? Who's actually on the receiving end benefiting from this policy choice? And this is so important to get. The interest paid on these bonds isn't some necessary cost of borrowing money. It is a deliberate policy choice, a choice to distribute government-created money to the people and institutions that hold those bonds. And since issuing the bonds in the first place is optional, these interest payments are completely avoidable. So who are these bondholders? Well, spoiler alert. It's not your average Aussie with a few bucks saved up. The ability to buy and hold large quantities of these safe, interest-bearing assets is overwhelmingly concentrated among big financial institutions and the wealthiest households, both here in Australia and overseas. So let's just call a spade here. When the government makes the choice to issue bonds and then pay interest on them, it is, in plain terms, providing a subsidy. It's a direct, risk-free payment to those who already have a lot of financial wealth.
And that leads us to a pretty provocative, but when you think about it, a pretty accurate term: welfare for the wealthy. It's a risk-free income stream guaranteed by the Australian taxpayer that flows directly to the very top of the wealth pyramid. And remember, this is an entirely optional program of payments that we could simply decide to stop.
So you start to connect the dots, right? If the bonds aren't actually needed for funding, if they just create this big, scary, and misleading debt story, and if they mainly just act as a subsidy for the well-off, well, the logical conclusion is kind of unavoidable. Why not just stop issuing them? So what would actually happen if we did that? Well, first, the government's ability to spend money on things we need wouldn't change one bit. But we would instantly eliminate billions of dollars in totally avoidable interest payments, that welfare for the wealthy. We would also kill off the paralyzing national debt narrative for good, which would free us all up to have a much clearer, more honest conversation about our economy. And this is where everything changes. This is the big pivot. If we can finally stop obsessing over the meaningless question of how do we pay for it, what are the real important questions we should be asking every time the government proposes to do something?
The debate needs to shift to the real world. Instead of asking, can we afford it in dollar terms, we should be asking things like, do we actually have the people, the skills, and the raw materials to do this project? Is our economy capable of producing the extra goods and services this spending will create? Or will it just push up prices and cause harmful inflation? And maybe most importantly, is this a fair and desirable thing to do for our society? Those are the real limits.
Ultimately, it all boils down to this one single, incredibly powerful idea. For a country like Australia, the true limit on what we can achieve together is not a shortage of money. The government can always create the dollars. The real limit is the availability of our real resources, our people, our infrastructure, our environment, our know-how.
So that leaves us with a pretty stark question, doesn't it? If our so-called national debt is really just a pseudo-debt, and if the billions we pay in interest on it are really just welfare for the wealthy, shouldn't we seriously consider just ending the whole thing? Just imagine what we could be talking about and what we could be doing if we focused on what's real.